Hello once again everyone, and this is the promised cheap armor that will fit over your fencing gear video. So as a little bit of a preamble, the idea here is we are not working on building a complete harness on the cheap. That would be a whole different video. This is meant to be, you have a base layer of tournament legal gear. Here are some pieces that you can buy in preparation for Yeehaw at the end of the year, or any other sort of mixed armor stuff. These are little simple pieces that will not require very much training to get used to, minimal modification, and will fit right over your standard fencing gear and work really well for you. So I've kind of laid things out in general to a couple different styles. We're going to start off with the simple stuff and we'll work our way from there. So starting off with, let's talk a little bit about this padding. Now, I already said, like, if you have a Gambeson, etc., or a jacket or whatever, and you're fine with getting Maille grease on that, then we don't need to worry about this. But if you are looking to have a more dedicated armor Gambeson, I do recommend it because, for reference, that used to be the color that interior is all the way on the outside. That's what Maille and Sweat will do. These ones are the ones I personally recommend. They're very cheap. You can get them off Cultivating, and I will have links to everything in front of you down below in the comments. But either way, not the comments, the description. I have to replace the buttons on this. This is the one I use the most. Which is not too difficult of a job to do because these little kind of cloth tabby buttons suck. They just fall off almost immediately. But once you do that, there's really minimal modification. There's also another style that a couple of my guys wear from this same maker. I don't like it as much because it's got a bit too much of a collar, and it is an earlier period one that pulls over rather than can button. So I very much prefer this one, which fits me really well, and I'm a smaller guy, so bear in mind reading it. It does have a bit of a kind of shape to it, and it comes in a couple different sizes in either off-white, black, or red. So if you're looking for a dedicated armor Gambeson, these are not bad. Bear in mind though, if we were talking unarmored, you're probably better off just sticking with your standard stuff. But you can throw Maille over that and not feel bad about it. So let's move on to Maille. So firstly, we'll go for the pricier option, Maille shirts. So these are 9mm riveted Maille shirts. These are both the same shirt, different sizes. Mine is a medium, and then this other one I believe is a large, possibly an extra large. As you can see, there's a pretty significant difference in size. The thing that's really going to affect it though is going to be the weight. Without a doubt, that shirt is way heavier because it is more material, so bear that in mind. These are on the pricier side of everything that we have sitting out, but they're pretty damn good. All you need to do is just throw it over the Gambeson. Some modification you might want to consider is here on mine, I've split the first couple rings, and that really makes it easier to throw on. It affords a decent amount of protection with minimal real training required, especially if you're wearing it over a Gambeson. You'll want to belt it around your middle, but otherwise, sans tailoring it, this should slide on without too much difficulty. You can also find them in smaller rings. You can also find them in the stainless steel variety. All of the above are good, just as long as it is riveted. It will keep you safe. So that's on the pricier side. If you're looking to drop some decent money for chest protection, that's pretty good. Meanwhile, if you're looking a little bit cheaper, that's where we get to these two. So these are mantles, meaning that they only cover kind of the collar area. Now I have two mantles. I got them both for sake of experiment. This one on the left, I don't actually know who originally makes it anymore because it used to be on Cultivating, and now it is found on Celtic Web Merchant, again, links below. And then this other one is made by, I believe, Lord of Battles. So the difference being is size, right? Now this one here, much smaller. Both of these will fit over your Gorget, Gambeson, etc. They'll just sit on top. This one doesn't necessarily do you a ton of favors if you don't have a breastplate or really a helmet. It doesn't do much good because it's so small. But the nice thing about it is quite well formed. So if you were looking to modify this into a more complex mantle, this would be pretty good. But by itself, it usually comes down only to about the collarbone. So it's okay, but I don't necessarily recommend it. It is cheap though, so that's the nice thing. It's pretty well formed. You just buckle it on over, and you don't have many things to worry about, and you can mess with the buckles. This guy, on the other hand, I do recommend a little bit more. So this one, as you can see, extends a lot further down. It has a much wider neck that'll have no difficulty going over anything. A couple of my guys have worn this in melees before, and it's always worked out really, really well. So this, under a breastplate, pretty much guarantees the entire top of your shoulders is protected as well as your neck. Fits well under a fencing mask, not a whole lot to worry about. And if you're wearing a helmet, even more gravy. But this is really what I'd recommend if you don't want to buy a full mail shirt and want to cover your shoulders at least. Get one of these. Again, standard, 9mm, riveted, all that good stuff. Now, moving on from mail, we get to plate. Let's talk about the breastplates first. So I have a bit of an array of breastplates here. This one on the farthest end is by GDHB, I think, or something along those lines. Again, links in the description in case I forget. That's kind of its default size. It's just marketed as European breastplate. It does a pretty good job. It is definitely better for if you're on the larger side. Fits even some of my biggest guys without difficulty. The only thing you got to watch out for is these buckles up here are relatively small, so you might want to look at maybe replacing those, perhaps even riveting the strap on there, but this will fit over pretty much everything, so if you're a bigger person, that's definitely good for you. Next to it, meanwhile, are slightly more complex, and I have same breastplate, 2 different sizes. This is the medium, this is the large. Now, height-wise, it doesn't really matter, but what these get you is they get you a lot more placard kind of protection, so this goes down to most people's navel, at least right about here. There's slight articulation, not that it really makes a huge difference, but it's a little bit nicer, a little bit, fits a little bit better, gives you just a bit more since your abdomen will not be as open. These ones have kind of been the standard. They also look pretty nice, pretty cheap, and they work fantastically. They also give a bit more in the lashing department, so whereas this is just a simple cross strap going across, this is cross strap and then also belt underneath. You can also replace all this pretty easily because it's just riveted on. We haven't had any difficulties with these failing too much since these buckles are relatively exposed. They don't get as much rust work, etc. Now, if you're looking for something slightly earlier period, this little guy, this Globos, I recently just got for myself. As you may see, again, medium, I'm pretty sure a medium as well, it's very small. And this fits me really, really well, so if you know me or have seen me, I'm not a big guy. So bear in mind that one of those is going to be much, much on the smaller side. Stops at my bottom rib, so my abdomen is very, very much open, but if you're looking for an earlier period kit, that is quite a good breastplate. Also affords you get not just this trap rail against anything trying to hit your throat, you also get this is slightly inclined forward, and that's really quite nice. The shaping is really, really good on this guy. I really, really like this breastplate. It's very good. So all these would be just fine options to slap over a Gambeson or over Maille as well, or what have you. You could also modify the straps to replace them with something more robust. You could do kind of what I did in regards to my breastplate and make a bit more of like a spine. Probably do a video on that when I talk about my harness personally sometime. But either way, lots of things you can do as long as you're willing to work with a rivet gun. Not too complicated, pretty cheap. I have quite a few more of these just for the school, and I do recommend that if you're looking to build your lance or so, getting some of these is the right call, just as long as you keep them clean. Okay, so moving down, we're going to get to arms and gauntlets. So out of the, in priority, right? Base layer is whatever your base layer is. I would recommend going for a breastplate over a Maille shirt because of expense, but I do recommend looking into the mantle or into the Maille shirt if you're going to be a bit more in the front row. So bear that in mind. As for gauntlets, this is kind of, I'd say gauntlets take priority over arms just because your gauntlets are going to be more, your hands are going to be more exposed. They're going to be out, able to be cut or thrust or what have you. And also, these are also very good and cheap options for if you want to practice harness fighting on your own. Breastplate, gauntlets, that's a pretty good step in the right direction because those are the main limiting factors at first. Now, I have 3 different options, but I also have some others to talk about. So these ones on the left, these are the Age of Craft Visbys. A couple people got them or still use them as kind of an option for Blossfechten. I don't recommend them for that. I've talked about that before. But for armor, they're fantastic because they're nice and stiff. They've got quite a bit of padding them because they were meant for Battle of the Nations. And they're on the pricier side, but they're at least held together pretty well and the craftsmanship's pretty good. So those are pretty nice, especially if you're looking for more of a brig look. They come in both finger edition and also in mitten edition. So if you're looking to do a lot of axe play or things along those lines, those can be quite nice. Going over to these, we have some hourglass gauntlets. These are made by Lord of Battles, as are those. We'll get to those in a second. These are honestly kind of the standard. The only downside with these guys is that they have this glove, and it's the same detractor for this. This glove is not fantastic. It will work, but it's not great. It's only attached at smallish points on each finger, meaning they'll be under a lot of duress. But the nice thing about this is because it's not, together, you can widen that if need be. You can strip out this glove and fix it without too much difficulty. I personally got 2 sets of these for the school over those because of their more integral pieces. They're just a simpler gauntlet, and because of that, they work quite well. They are quite durable, and they're nice and safe for the most part. Don't wear them for steel sparring, but for armor stuff, it'll do just fine. Meanwhile, these guys, these were my first gauntlets, actually. Now, I should point out, again, glove gave out on me after a lot of hard training, so these have not been put back together yet. But if you're looking for something that affords you a little bit more forearm, or you're looking for, Gothic gauntlets, because Gothic gauntlets are cool, these are pretty good for their price, right? I really don't have many complaints about these gauntlets, other than, of course, the glove giving out on me and my own personal dislike for floating thumbs. But beyond that, they've held together very well. The buckles have rusted over time, so I need to replace those. But beyond that, they're great. They've taken significant force and been okay. I've used them in armored deeds before. They also go further up your arm, which is nice because it gives you more protection if you're in that front row. And, they're just a bigger option pretty much. So these are pretty good. Now for those ones as well, there's also another option that is same sort of cut, but not as much fluting, a slightly simpler, different fingers. Those are also pretty good. One of my guys has those. The only thing you got to kind of look out for is the weakness in that hinged thumb coming off. But either way. So for these guys, meanwhile, we have a couple different options. So when it comes to armoring your arms, again, we are talking about over your already standard fencing gear. So these is just adding protection. Now, most of these are best off being pointed onto maille or something along those lines. Because basically, once you have a maille shirt on, you just need a string and you can all of a sudden have a kind of universal attachment system. But these would also work just fine over any of your standard fencing gear as long as you can secure it. So first option, cheapest option, are jack chains. Never seen jack chains before. Basically, all these is it's just plate that goes on the outside of your arm. So this goes around your wrist, that's your elbow, and then up there is your shoulder. These are nice because they give you a decent amount of protection, and if a blade tries to cut you, it can take a lot of the hits out. And, we'll talk a little bit about that kind of thing. We have actually talked about already, but when you see the Yeehaw rules video, if a cut touches that plate while cutting your arm, that took a lot of it out of it. People wore these for a reason, even though they look pretty flimsy. The thing you got to watch out for, though, is, of course, this doesn't give you any actual elbow protection. It's just the outside, so it needs to be worn over some already, safe elbow pads, etc. But because they're relatively loose, they're nice and simple to put on top of something. So that's rather nice. If you are looking for something a little bit more beefy, though, these guys, again, part of my kind of original armor setup, they're huge. Like, these are massive, but they'll fit over pretty much any arm guard you can think of. And again, you can just tie them on by putting some points through here. So also not necessarily a bad option. And then finally, pauldrons. Now, these are the only 2 pauldrons that I happen to have on hand, but what you're looking for is simplicity. Don't try to get anything articulated or complicated or things along those lines. Just get some simple spalders is what these actually are. Pauldrons being bigger and articulated. Just little things that can sit on top of your shoulder and give you a little bit of extra protection. You may even only want to wear one, so someone else can wear one on their other left shoulder. But the idea there being, again, this is just simple little bits of protection. So you may notice I don't have any helmets on the field. That's because helmets, even at their simplest, do require a decent amount of modification to make safe. And so I would really recommend, if you are giving priority for, hey, what armor should I get in preparation for, this could also be in preparation for fighting a Squire's list at a deed under any Decoven rules. Focus on getting this sort of stuff before you worry about a helmet, because the breastplate, the maille, the gauntlets, that's what's going to make the difference. Yes, your head is open, but we're all pretty used to guarding our head. And in regards to melees, etc., it is complicated to make your head safe. I would recommend just sticking to a fencing mask for beginning off. and going with this sort of torso protection, because when you're all blocked together, head is a small target, torso is a big target. And in general, this will also, you can pass these pieces on, you can add to these pieces. These all can be a great baseline for building a more complex harness later, if that's what you want to do. In regards to things like legs, I really don't recommend worrying too much about it unless you already have legs, because we want to make sure they're plenty safe. And legs, like heads, can get kind of finicky, as can complex arms, because if you can't fit them well over what you're wearing, you've got problems. So these are all simple pieces, kind of, munitions grade, cheap, and reliable. We've used these all multiple times, and they are still kicking. But either way, hopefully that gives people a good starting direction for if you want to get some pieces together. I do highly recommend, checking the sizes, etc., checking over your own gear. And don't forget, if you're gonna put Maille on, make sure you're okay with your jacket ending up looking like that, because the grease and the little rivets are going to make it ugly. So don't use your nice jacket for it. But otherwise, thank you all very, very much for watching. And we'll go over some other equipment recommendations another time.